My name is Gidon Bromberg. I'm the Israeli co-director of EcoPeace Friends of the Earth Middle East. I sit in our offices in Tel Aviv, Israel. We're a truly unique organization. In fact, we're the only organization that is Palestinian, Jordanian, and Israeli together, working under a single roof from our three offices in Tel Aviv, in Bethlehem, and in Amman, focusing on our shared water resources as a means to both promote sustainable development and sustainable peace. The birth of the organization, was a struggle to begin with because, the idea came from the conclusion of a master's thesis that I had written while I was at the American University in Washington, D.C. And it concluded my master's thesis that there's a need for the environmental community, environmental activists to get to know each other and perhaps to start working together from Israel, Palestine, Jordan, and Egypt, if we want to see sustainable development as one of the outcomes of the Middle East peace process. This was back in 1993. And one of the conclusions was that there's a need for an environmental organization to be created. And, the very first challenge was to reach out to leading environmentalists in the region and to try and understand, is there an interest? So right from that first meeting, we had to overcome, the conflict and the barriers of not knowing each other. And so we organized a meeting in Taba, in Egypt. And this was several months after the signing of the peace treaty between Israel and Jordan. Our Jordanian environmentalists crossed first from Aqaba to Eilat, which was a story because not many people had crossed by that time. And then he wanted to cross from Eilat to Taba. But a Jordanian had never crossed from Eilat to Taba before. And although no visa was required, so he didn't need to apply, he didn't need to tell anyone, the Egyptian security had never seen a Jordanian passport at the border coming from Eilat to Taba. And we were stuck at that border crossing. We'd left Israel, yet we were not being allowed to enter Egypt until a phone call came from Cairo 4 hours later telling us, yes, there's no reason why a Jordanian can't cross. Just the fact that they've never crossed before because there'd never been a peace treaty between Israel and Jordan before. So right from the beginning, you saw the bureaucracy, the lack of trust, holding people back. People were, the security on the Egyptian side were fearful of, but we have never seen a Jordanian passport cross from Israel to Egypt. But of course, it was much more than that. Once we got into the discussions, there were those around the table that had their private and their political reasons why the status quo should not be upset. And it was really on the second day, after a very difficult first day of discussions, where the differences of self-interest became very apparent. That one of the individuals simply just stood up from the Arab side and said, you know what, I've thought about this thoroughly, and I truly believe that we need a regional organization that does include Arabs and Israelis together. And I'm going to help make it happen. And as soon as that one individual stood up and really stood up against the crowd, and the crowd was far more cautious and suspicious, that was a major turning point because none of the other players felt that they could afford not to be part of such an intriguing initiative that was being formed. And that's actually how the organization was established back in 1994. Again, through the leadership, a little bit of a vision of one individual that was willing to, sort of stand up against the street that the majority around our little table, which is very representative of the situation in the Middle East here as a whole, and that one individual from one of the Arab countries is really responsible 20 years later for an organization that today is 100 staff, tens of thousands of activists, youth, mayors, politicians being involved in cross-border environmental cooperative efforts. In this particular case, it took some vision, an individual that became inspired by what might be possible and could not justify in his own mind, according to his own values, to say no, even though everything he was hearing around the table was that, this could be dangerous. There's still no peace treaty in place between Israel and Palestine. It's just an interim agreement. What would the larger environmental movement have to say? How would the street react? What would the media report? So willing to be so motivated, taken by the vision to be the risk taker. And I think that's the leadership lesson, is that there are times, there are many times, but there are times when the vision is so grand, is so important, it's so contrary to the reality on the ground that you just need to stand up and take that risk and give it everything you've got. I think, in many ways, that's been the philosophy of the organization ever since. We continue to be enormous risk takers because the street, the majority even of the environmental community that we're part of, remains highly suspicious. Our activities are highly controversial. We're accused of leading the interests of the other side and not our own side. This tribal divide is the mainstay in our part of the world, and we're acting contrary to that tribal outlook.
Wow.